Live from the European Parliament in Strasbourg, this is Raw Politics. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on the program, and this is what we have for you. Seizing control. British MPs take over the Brexit process to try to break an impossible deadlock. Brexit alternatives. We ask MEPs to weigh in with their preferred solution to the Brexit crisis. End of the internet. Why some artists are up in arms as MEPs pass a controversial copyright law. Two-way Silk Road. And Angela Merkel to balance growing Chinese influence. Lambert's Lambat, the Belgian MEP slapdown of Theresa May in tonight's Raw Moment. Welcome to the program. Now, during the Brexit referendum, the UK electorate were told they could take back control from the EU if they voted to leave. Well, control was taken back last night, only it was MPs taking control from the British Prime Minister Theresa May. Well, there will now be a series of votes tomorrow, and MPs will have their say on where they think Brexit should go from here. The chaos in Westminster has not gone unnoticed by MEPs here in the European Parliament in Strasbourg. Let's take a look.
Theresa May might be tempted to play scorched earth policy and say, well, whatever the Parliament does, if it has a positive majority for something I don't like, I will not do it. And there's a danger there, because, well, if there's one lesson that we have learned from Theresa May's attitude, is her inability to factor in what others think.
I'm very pleased that yesterday evening an amendment, the so-called Letwin amendment, has been adopted, because that means that it is possible now to work in Britain towards a cross-party proposal, a cross-party alliance that could upgrade fundamentally.
And after that news conference, tracked him down to try and find a little more about where Brexit goes from here. Have a listen.
It's not to meet to the direction of the UK. Well, so what we hope now, after the approval of the Letwin amendment, there will be a cross-party cooperation and there will be a cross-party majority for a close relationship between the EU and UK, and we can put that their proposal easily, I think, if it is a good proposal naturally, into the political declaration and even upgrade these political declarations.
You mentioned the people who were marching. Should there be a second referendum?
It's not to us to decide on a second referendum. It's not to us. That's not our competence. Our competence is to have an orderly withdrawal, and with the approval of the Letwin amendment, there is now a possibility, I hope, for a cross-party cooperation, a cross-party majority in favour of something. Because until now, as you know, the British Parliament was always against something, against the no deal, against the second referendum, and so on. So now to hear from the House of Commons in the coming days, at the latest next week, what their proposal is in favor of something, in favor of what type of relationship. And that's what we're expecting. We will not interfere in the discussions. We didn't do it for more than 2 years concerning deal, no deal, second referendum, no second referendum, and so on. That is the competence of the House of Commons. That is not our competence.
Should Theresa May step down?
That's also not our competence.
You have to say so. Who would hurt more with a no deal? All right, well, let us cross live to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who can walk us through what is happening in the House of Commons. It can get a little bit confusing, Darren, so do tell us, what are we expecting to see now?
Well, tonight in the UK, after what the government suffered another historic defeat in this Brexit process, essentially losing control of its ability to decide what happens next, it has effectively got what many would describe as a new Prime Minister in place, or a man at least who is in charge of this process. He is Sir Oliver Letwin, a former Conservative Cabinet Minister, but is now spearheading these so-called indicative votes that we're likely to see play out tomorrow. Essentially, Tessa, it means that the government that is normally in charge of the legislative process at Westminster no longer is. MPs are, and they're determined to test the support within the British House of Commons for what type of deal the UK would like with the UK. Now, there was no longer in charge of this process, but we are expecting a number of scenarios to be tested by MPs tomorrow, including a range of options from revoking Article 50, stopping the process entirely, to no deal, essentially Britain crashing out of the European Union. What do MPs think about staying inside the EU's customs union, for example, or indeed inside the EEA, which is essentially the single market, or indeed potentially a second referendum, which we know that there is support amongst Labour MPs and indeed many voters for that prospect. So they will test all these scenarios in a series of votes tomorrow. They are indicative, they're not binding on the government, and Theresa May has made it clear that she won't necessarily do what Parliament tells her to do. And this is a process that will not necessarily end tomorrow, Tessa. It could easily drag into next week as they narrow down these choices. It could be very messy indeed. And there is still finally the possibility that Theresa May may well bring back her deal for a third chance, potentially towards the end of this week. Today she seemed to get some support from ERG members, from Brexiteers like Jika Rees-Mogg, who said that her deal, despite as bad as it was, might be better than no Brexit at all. But crucially, the DUP, those Northern Irish Unionist MPs who are supporting her government, have said yet again today that they cannot support it. So it still seems unlikely that it will pass, but Theresa May may well push yet again for her deal to go through. It's all incredibly unpredictable, but it will play out in London over the coming days.
Indeed, and here we are again. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor. And joining me now in the studio to discuss this is Hans Olaf Henkel. He's a at the Parliament. All right, let's try to make sense of what is happening in the UK from your point of view. Hans, is this getting any clearer?
I think that if none of these indicative votes tomorrow get a majority, then I think it is likely that Theresa May comes back for the third time with her deal, and maybe then she makes it, because then she can say, look, I've tried everything. Now I give you a last chance before a no-deal Brexit.
So you don't think she should be giving up now? I mean, it's just like we're going around in circles. Is that the feeling?
Well, I think this was always her strategy. I think one underestimates her ability and her tenacity. I think she is trying to push these deputies with their back to the wall, so that they have at the end only one alternative to her deal, which is then no deal. So I think that's likely to happen, but that is not what I would like to happen. I like the Parliament to vote for a second referendum, so there is a chance that Britain stays in the European Union.
Well, there you go, a second referendum. Matt, does this feel all like a strategy to you?
No, I don't think logic is playing a part here at all. The truth of the matter is we don't know what way any of the votes will go tomorrow. We don't even know if any of them to pass her deal. And of course, while all of that is playing out, real people and their lives and their livelihoods are at stake, and the uncertainty is creating havoc. And I know in Ireland, which arguably has the most to lose from a bad Brexit scenario, that the tension is rising. People are asking what is likely to be the scenario. Of course, nobody wants to see a no-deal situation develop, and therefore they would prefer to have a prolonged period of uncertainty rather than certain catastrophe. But at the same time, people want answers, and they're looking to the House of Commons, and the answers haven't been forthcoming yet.
Did anything change actually by the fact that the MPs have now taken control, have taken the reins? Has it changed?
Well, yes. think there is now, for the very first time, a realistic chance for a second referendum. If the other alternatives are being defeated and, let's say, the idea of a second referendum gets a majority, then I think it will be very difficult for Theresa May to ignore that. And let's face it, the argument that the British people have already been asked once, so they shouldn't be asked twice, doesn't really work, because she herself has already presented her deal 2 times to the Parliament, and it was the same deal. So I think the logic doesn't hold.
But I don't have any difficulty with the prospect of a second referendum, but I think just for your European listeners to be aware that the people in the north of Ireland already voted Remain on their first chance of being asked, and that is the vote that, above all else, that needs to be respected, because what we are facing with now is the outworking of a contradiction that went to the heart of Theresa May's policy, where she said from the outset that she planned to remove Britain from the customs union, and that she wanted to take the north of Ireland with her, but that she also wanted to avoid a hard border. And throughout all the deliberations, the British government have yet to put forward a single proposition. And the only live proposition to actually somehow addressing those peculiarities is the withdrawal agreement and the backstop that's contained in it. And MPs from across the political divide have time and time again voted against the expressly stated wishes of the people in the north of Ireland. So lots of them are asking themselves a bigger constitutional question as to which union they would prefer to be part of.
Oh, there you go. But you were talking about what Theresa May is going to be doing next. These are indicative votes. At the end of the day, does it mean anything? And she does not have to listen to what the MPs say. She could very well just do as she pleases.
Well, that is true, but I think if she totally ignores what they want, then she has no chance with her own deal. I think she has been defeated twice. So I think that is the only alternative for the deal. And by the way, on the border question, I see only 2 solutions. One is a customs union, or a second referendum with the outcome that they remain.
There is a third option, which is a united Ireland.
Well,
which resolves everybody's problems.
That's sort of is a different solution. I wonder what the unionists in Northern Ireland say to that. And I don't want to get involved in this, but that makes this even more complicated.
I think as everybody's racking their brains on what the alternatives are, MPs, MEPs here trying to questions, there is that feeling, maybe enough is enough. I don't know. Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, he has been speaking to EU politicians here in Strasbourg just to get a gauge on putting which options are likely to be taken. Darren, do tell us, what is the feeling here in Strasbourg?
You know what, it is really one of growing frustration and angst about this entire process. It must be said, when we start first talking to MEPs here in Strasbourg, 6 months ago, Tessa, when raw politics started, or indeed in Brussels, there was a sense that they wanted Britain to try and somehow remain inside the EU, that a second referendum may well be the solution. But Parliament is much more fractured now on the way forward, and as I say, there is frustration about the process. Many MEPs are essentially fed up with Brexit dominating not just the airways, but essentially the Parliament and its institutions. And many of them just want it over and done with. And many of them do not want a long extension to this process. They do not want British MEPs rejoining European Parliament over the summer. And that is certainly the mood that I got, as you say, when I spoke to a cross range of MEPs a little bit earlier on today. MPs are going to vote on this range of issues: deal, no deal, a softer Brexit, or a second referendum. Which one would you like to see happen?
Well, I really would like to see happen that they vote for a deal, because I really think that's important, and for Great Britain and for Europe. But of course, for me, it's really stupidity that they voted to Brexit, because I think they were better off inside the European Union. But I also think that it's a little bit the fault of Europe itself. We didn't defend the project enough. We should have gone there and say to Nigel Farage, stop it with your lies. I think we did not defend the project enough.
I believe that Brexit is a mistake. I wish the United Kingdom could remain in the European Union. I'm not sure that this will happen. But if there has to be a Brexit, then there should be a Brexit with an agreement. That is much better than having a Brexit without an agreement, because that would be the worst outcome of all alternatives.
I think the most fairest way would
be to have a second referendum, because the people voted in full mood of going away. Now they see the withdrawal treaty and what hard Brexit was. They know exactly what will, and now gives them the chance to have a second vote.
I am totally opposed to any delay, any derogation. So it's if Parliament, House of Commons don't agree with what we have now, maybe with a small addenda or not, I don't know, I will vote for a no deal.
If you're an MP tomorrow, which one would you vote for?
If I was an MP, I would be voting to revoke Article 50 altogether. But we've got to look at the options that are in front of us. I actually did tweet earlier on today what I think will happen. Regardless of whether the MPs can come up to some form of agreement or not on what they want to see, it's inevitable now that we're going to have to make an application for a long extension. And a purpose for that long extension, whether it might be Norway plus, it could be a further referendum, but it also means then that you have to now take part in the European elections as well.
Are you a bit fed up with Brexit?
Well, I think all of us are, and there doesn't seem to be any good solutions anymore.
Tessa, I think despite that uncertainty and that there is an extension to this, to the UK Parliament and to the other heads of government across Europe, not necessarily to this place, though they do have to ratify whatever deal is passed in London. No doubt we've still got a long way to go in this process, and I think what the British government are hoping tomorrow is that actually what will emerge from Westminster is that Parliament cannot even decide amongst itself, even when it has taken back control, to coin a phrase, and that ultimately they will still yet again return to Theresa May's deal. But for, I think, MEPs here trying to get away from Brexit, I think that's not going to simply be possible, at least for the next couple of weeks and months to come.
All right, thank you for that. In the meantime, Darren McCaffrey there. And joining me in the studio now is a Swedish MEP from the European People's Party, Gunnar Hökmark. So Gunnar, good to see you with us. I'd like to pose to you the options. Deal, no deal, soft Brexit, second referendum. Which of these do you think is likely?
Of course, a second referendum would be the absolutely best thing, also for the British people, because now there is an opportunity to make a choice.
But that doesn't guarantee a result that perhaps Remainers would like.
It guarantees a better democratic result than just the vote about leaving without knowing where to go. Now there is a clear image, clear picture what will happen when you leave. And that is something to have a referendum on. So, of course, from pure democratic reasons, there's a good reason to have a second referendum.
And you don't think Europe is feeling enough is enough?
Well, I think the British is at stake here. And I think the British people should have a say about where to go now when you know where to go.
And Hans, you've always been saying in Parliament, you're very passionately saying that the EU should have done more. Do you still think that?
Oh yes, I mean by saying enough is enough and constantly bashing London, ignoring the own responsibility for Brexit by a lot of people here in Brussels and Strasbourg. I think they are forgiving a chance, because I have been a couple of times in London, met a lot of Brexiteers and Remainers, and I must say I have met some Remainers who said they have become Brexiteers because the way Barnier, Juncker and Verhofstadt have been treating and have been bashing London all over. You just saw an example of an example of Lamberts. I mean, who is he that he can blast the Prime Minister of Britain?
No.
So you get in Britain a counter-reaction to this arrogance.
But I think that's fundamentally wrong. Of course, you can find a lot of Boris Johnsons here and a lot of Guy Verhofstadts in London, so to say, to be diplomatic. But overall, we love United Kingdom and the British people to stay in Europe.
Yes, I agree.
This is the important message. And then you have some people who are demonizing each other. I mean, to be a part of the Brexit campaign as well. Let's look at the things as they really are now. Now there is an agreement. there is an opportunity to make a choice, and this is obviously the problem for the governments. You have a very asymmetric situation. I would like the British Parliament to get into power now and then discuss, is there reason now to have a second referendum? And from a democratic point of view, certainly.
British Parliament in power, would that mean Theresa May on the sidelines?
I think that
that
has been a part of the process for a long time, as I see it.
A part of the process?
No, she has been at the sideline because normally Prime Minister do have some sort of majority in the Parliament.
Do you want to see her stepping down?
I don't have any perspectives on that. That is up to the British Conservatives and the British Parliament. But obviously there is a problem of steering the country.
Well, I agree that most of the people in this Parliament want Britain to stay in the European Union, no question. But I'm not meeting many people who have done anything about it. I have myself come up with an initiative which I presented here, and I offer Britain a new deal so they could stay. I can quite frankly see no difference in this London bashing between Farage and Verhofstadt. They are both aiming always at London.
What about Theresa May bashing, if you will?
Well, I don't blame her and bash her.
We heard from Philippe Lamberts today.
We should send signals, active signals, to Britain that we love them. And we should admit that the economic problems are not only faced by Britain, they are faced by Germany and Sweden and many other countries as well. It is in our interest for them to stay. It is not always good just to bash London. We have to start to ask ourselves the question,
but
what can we do to help the Remainers in Britain?
But you're talking about, you brought this up as well, the kind of leadership that Theresa May has, but you said it was part of the process that she was being sidelined today. We heard from
representing small groups here. The important thing that I would like to say to the British people, we love you and we need you. And we would like to see to that we stay on together because we do need each other. And then, having said that, of course there will be some Boris Johnsons here and there and Farage here and there, Verhofstadt here and there. But let's talk about the big bulk of people who are serious.
So when you talk about you don't like the bashing, do you think Philippe Lamberts went too far?
Yes, I think this is, but it is more or less typical. My point is that no one here really helps the Remainers in Britain. And nobody helps the Brexiteers to change their mind by saving their face. For instance, one idea which we had is, look, many more countries now, some more responsibility and autonomy over their own immigration. If we had offered that to Britain at the Cameron time, the Brexit wouldn't have happened.
Just a very quick last question to you, Gunnar. The EU, the Commission had said that the no-deal preparations, they're done. The EU is ready. So a no-deal wouldn't hurt. You say you want the UK to stay, but a no-deal, the EU is ready. That's fine then.
A no-deal would be a train crash. Very serious for United Kingdom, but also for us, for all of us, and for Europe. I think the most happy guy would be Mr. Putin about that. So that should be avoided at any price.
And Mr. Trump, perhaps.
Well, there you go.
I do agree with that, but I also say that any Brexit is bad for both of us. That is the message.
Okay. All right. We will see what happens next. The ball is in the court of the House of Commons now. All right. A lot more coming up for you on Raw Politics. MEPs give the green light to a controversial copyright reform. Critics say it curbs freedom of speech online, and that debate is coming up next. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, after more than 2.5 years of fierce campaigning from both sides, MEP here have voted in favor of a controversial new copyright aimed at holding big tech giants like Google and Facebook responsible for copyrighted material uploaded to their sites. So essentially, it's the platforms that will now be responsible. And it hasn't been an easy ride, but today the proposal's chief, Axel Voss, he looked happy and relieved as MEPs backed his proposal 348 to 274, ending years of activism which pitted musicians, film directors, publishers and more against internet heavyweights like YouTube and Amazon. It's been a very emotive topic indeed, and this continued until the very last moment. Now, those in favor say it's a huge step forward, while those against, they're calling it a quote day for internet freedom. Now, that proposal still has been approved by all member states, but for now, the EU has finally put its foot down. All right, and joining us for this panel to unpick this controversial new law is Dominic Kiss, a Save the Internet campaigner. And we also have John Phelan from the International Federation of Music Publishers. All right, it has been really an emotive, divisive topic, and campaigns have been going on until the last moment. All right, this dark day for internet freedom, I'll start with you, Dominic. Dark day for internet freedom. But it seems to be this is aimed at protecting content creators. Why is it a dark day for internet freedom?
Well, it should be protecting the content creators, but actually it doesn't really do. We have Article 12, which people were already filing lawsuits in Germany, and they won against the big publishing companies. And that's one thing of the entire directive which doesn't really work out that good, because the people, the big publishers, they are trying to get back the money. They have to pay the content creators in Germany.
You are for protecting content creators.
We also the content creators. We do not want to endanger them in any way, or do not want to decline them to get money.
And sorry, I've seen the hashtag today, hashtag Save the Internet, all over Twitter. Yeah. Save the Internet from what exactly?
Well, from upload filters, from Article 13. We do not want any upload filters on the Internet, because that would definitely endanger the Internet, how it is right now. And that's one thing we don't want to have.
All right, you represent, Jonathan, content creators as well, copyrighted content creators, but there is a big difference in the opinion that you hold. You're very happy today.
Well, today's a first step. It's really just a clarification of the liability of these services under the normal 2001 existing rules of copyright. I think it's really important to remember that what this copyright directive does, it doesn't change what copyright is. It changes who must obey existing copyright laws, and that's fundamentally important, because there's been a lot of scaremongering. Honestly, I've never seen a campaign like it in terms of banning memes, banning GIFs.
Is it a scare campaign though? Because when you have a blanket, when you have algorithms or just a blanket filter, how are they supposed to know what is satire, what is?
There is no to aggregate and generate revenue. Is the very same thing which can recognize content which is copyright protected. I think the best
this is not foolproof though, isn't it?
But it's anything to do with users' privacy, to do with expression, and so on and so on. Content recognition technology, it must be remembered, is in place today.
Okay, jump in
on the
you
internet.
Seem to be disagreeing.
And Article 13 clarifies that technology should be simply used more fairly.
Okay.
Simple as that. Nothing new, just more fair.
Okay, do you agree? And you seem to be disagreeing.
Well, I do disagree with that, because those filter technologies, as you just call them, they are not foolproof, and they will never be, because we have Content ID from which YouTube and Google is using, and they invested millions of dollars to get to this point. And this machine already does. We have few videos where the meowing of was recognized and was monitored, or rather monetized by another company. We have a German creator who got his entire video demonetized and monetized to another suspicious company, and that creator was creating his own music.
How does it affect a content creator, for example? How would someone who's creating on YouTube and making money from YouTube, you're saying it affects their livelihood, the way they make money?
Well, yes. It does affect them, that small YouTubers who want to become big YouTube stars, to have like a possibility to earn money from this, to make a living out of their YouTube things. They won't be able to become bigger because of those upload filters, because if they use anything that might be resembling a copyright infringement, they will instantly get a copyright strike.
So don't you think this is like the David and Goliath, the big copyrighted musicians against little ones who just want to get their name out there?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Because the value gap, which is the problem behind which Article 13 seeks to solve, affects every single musician you've ever heard of. It affects legacy artists who've been around for 40 years, who are on YouTube or similar services. It affects the very new artists, whether it's a Finnish jazz musician or a Slovakian folk musician. Everybody is affected by the value gap. All Article 13 seeks to do is to ensure that these services use the existing technologies, which they know very, very well, to correct a valuation problem. Let me be clear, it's not an enormous profit off music. What this article does is clarify that Google services have to observe existing laws to pay more fairly.
Let us get the view of someone who does create content. His name is Mike Hatch. He is from Romania, and he has about 1.4 million subscribers on YouTube, if I'm not mistaken. Mike, good of you to join us. Okay, what will this change for you? This new directive, this copyright directive that was passed here, how will it change your life?
Well, not just my life, but I think the life of all creators across Europe. Of course, this being a directive, we need to wait and see how each individual country implements this in their particular territory. But overall, it will be something that will make YouTubers suffer, and not only YouTubers and content creators, but users as well. Because this is a big industry. It's a multi-million-dollar industry that risks going down the drain.
How will it impact you? Do you use copyrighted material? I mean, remix, because I believe that YouTube does allow that. So what is it in concrete terms? How does it stop creating content?
One of the shows I create is based on reviewing videos from YouTube or content, news, and so forth. So in order for me to comment on those particular events or videos, I need to show them, obviously. And this normally is fair use, because I'm not re-uploading the whole video. I'm just commenting on it or making satire or something like this. And with Article 13, this may be impossible to do in the future, because if there's a robot in place that actually checks all the content on YouTube, that algorithm does not know that I am doing a commentary. It only knows that I have a frame or a picture or a piece of a song that doesn't belong to me and will terminate my video. So yeah.
So Mike, what are you going to do now? What do you think should be done?
Well, that's an interesting question, and it's very, very hard to say. My feeling is that most of the politicians who actually voted for this, I don't think they really know what they voted for, or maybe they don't know the whole implications that this might have. So what I tried to do until this point is contact the MEPs from my country, or speak with other MEPs from other countries. I've been to Brussels and to the European Parliament in Strasbourg sometimes in order to do this, and we managed to impress, let's say, some of them.
You're basically trying to get your voice and your opinion out. Mike Hatch, thank you for joining us there. Just a very quick reaction, because you share the same opinion as him. A reaction from you. Here is a guy who will be affected by this. You're talking about protecting content creators.
Absolutely.
Not happy.
We are the content creation industry. We want to support that. Mike just referred already there to robots, to algorithms. I mean, this is not true. These technologies are already in place, and actually, if Mike reads Article 13.5, there's protections for review, parody, pastiche already in there. So actually, it's an advance for users like Mike. What this also does, it advances the musicians who are not helped at the moment.
Can you pick that why you were laughing?
Yeah, because you just said that those things are already in place, and that memes, for example, those funny pictures are explicit. Are not affected by this directive.
Okay, you have 10 seconds to finish your point.
Yeah, but as long as
memes are not relevant to this directive.
Yeah, but as long as but as long as a filter doesn't recognize what's humor, it won't work out, because it doesn't work.
So there you go. The two sides of the copyright argument. Plus, it's not over. It is a directive. This debate is going to go on. All right, we have a lot more coming up for you on Raw Politics United Front. We will be talking about why European leaders are concerned, growing concern over Chinese influence, and what they're going to do about it. That's next. Welcome back to our politics. China Xi Jinping is in Paris today, and earlier he met with Angela Merkel, Emmanuel Macron, and Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker. The red carpet was rolled out for Xi, but there was caution as well as pageantry from EU leaders. Their message was that Europe is ready to do business with China, but they called for a more level playing field and for Chinese markets to open themselves up to European goods. Let's take a listen.
Nous souhaitons pouvoir avancer sur la construction d'un multilatéralisme rénové. Alors nous avons des divergences. Évidemment, l'exercice de la puissance dans l'histoire de l'humanité ne va pas sans rivalité. Nul d'entre nous n'est naïf, mais nous respectons la Chine et nous sommes déterminés au dialogue et à la coopération. Et nous entendons naturellement de nos grands partenaires qu'ils respectent aussi l'unité de l'Union européenne comme les valeurs qu'elle porte pour elle-même et dans le monde.
合作是主要潮流，就是有不同的分歧，或者说有一些竞争，可能也是一些良性竞争，合作大于竞争，我们应该增加正能量。
All right, apologies for that. There were no subtitles, but Emmanuel Macron, the French president there, was essentially saying that Europe is ready and is showing a united front to do business with China, but there has to be a level playing field. That's essentially the message of Emmanuel Macron, Angela Merkel and Jean-Claude Juncker today. And joining me now in the studio to discuss this is Alfred Sant, a Maltese MEP with the Socialists and Democrats group, and Ana Gomes, a Portuguese MEP who is also with the Socialists and Democrats group, but clearly on two different sides of this story, on this China-EU relationship. I'll start with you, Alfred. Today, you know, you do want a closer relationship with China. You're talking about trade of some, how many trillion, 5 trillion trading dollars there on this Belt and Road Initiative that they want to do, infrastructure, investing in infrastructure in Europe. Aren't you worried that this is like a Trojan horse in the EU?
Well, actually, Malta is already a member of the Belt and Road Initiative. Italy became just 3, 4, 5 days back, and I think it's a very good idea. It has got to be looked upon in a rational way, in an objective way, as an instrument by which Europe or European countries can cooperate with China.
But what is your gauge? Is it just about trade? Is that your gauge?
You start, you move out of that into investment, and you move out of that into cultural relations. In my country, we've had quite long, close relations with China. The Maltese Prime Minister back in '71 went there before actually Nixon did.
Yeah.
So all over these years, we've had quite a good relationship with them. So it was always
we understand
positive.
the trade. We understand the trade, but Anna, I'd like to bring you into this because you clearly have a more cautious view on how to deal with China.
Yes, I mean
trade is important.
I'm all for trade and trade in with level playing field, so of course with reciprocity. I think that's the message that Macron and others were passing. But let's not be naive, as it was actually also said by Macron. China is, as a power with strategic aims, has hegemonic purposes. And of course, they are using our own weaknesses, because it was, for instance, due to the austerity policies that China came and bought on the cheap anything that was relevant economically, industrially in many of our member states, including in my country, Portugal. Today it's the Chinese Communist Party that controls either the power production, either the network for power distribution, and this was done with the blessing of the Troika. So Europe has some responsibilities at the time of when it was extremely naive. Now it's trying to recover with the screening of foreign direct investment, namely by China. But there is another very important question. So I'm all for indeed trade with reciprocity, but we should also not neglect the fact that China is not a democratic power. And you know, when you have artificial intelligence now already being implied in China to give scores to citizens to determine if they have the right to have a certain loan from banks or to access certain university, you are into a Orwellian world that you cannot.
So, Alfred,
I stay back from making value judgments about other nations. We're not in the business of making value judgments about other nations. We're in the business of cooperating like peoples do. And on that basis, I think we have to consider China on a standalone basis and not put in ideas that basically are not European-centered. What's happening at the moment is that, for instance, the US is making lots of pressure on the Europeans not to consider G5 from China sources, because they say this is going to give China espionage hold on Europe. I mean, that's something to consider, but not something to take so seriously, after all, because who's been spying on the German Chancellor? Not the Chinese, the Americans.
Okay, not putting value judgment. Is that a valid point?
Well, I've been to the Huawei in Beijing with the mission of the European Parliament 2 or 3 years ago. And we asked questions, and we were told that indeed Huawei is having to collect and store in China every data they collect anywhere in the world. So we're dealing with a power that is not democratic. Okay, I am in the first line to criticize the US for all the spying and so on. But at least in the US, it's you have the US now under the spell of Trump, but still it's a democratic society. You have mechanisms of redress. You can go to courts and expect some kind of a democratic
because this voice is quite strong in the EU. So how
is that the Chinese do what Google does. And basically the problem is, okay, Google is doing it. What's to control Google? Here in Europe, we're doing something at least about it. But in the US, that doesn't exist. So frankly, I mean, just trying to put the devil on the Chinese floor and saying, okay, we're the saints here.
But you can't take Google to court in the US or in Europe.
You have to have legal grounds to do that.
But in China, it's much more complicated, and you don't have a system of independent courts. And this cannot be overlooked when you're talking about critical infrastructure, such as ports, for instance, that now the Chinese already control in the framework of this Road and Belt Initiative, or actually the 5G thing. It's something which is going to give them, indeed, a tool to actually put our independence and our European security. It's not national security.
Well, Huawei in the UK, for instance, has developed a project by which they developed their software in relationship with the British security services. And the British security services have said, okay, there's no problem with G5 in the UK.
Unfortunately, actually, we have run out of time on this topic, but it seems it's just getting heated up. But we have a lot more coming up for you on Raw Politics. A new poll in the UK says that more people would vote to remain in the EU rather than leave. And we want to know, have you changed your mind on Brexit? Your call is coming up at 7 p.m. CET, and we want to hear from you. Contact information is on your screen now. You can call us at 00800 333 3702 or join the debate using the hashtag Raw Politics. Our lines are open now.
What would you do if you were Theresa May?
Well, I'd like to think I wouldn't have got us to this situation to start with.
Very simple. She should have resigned long ago. I think it's a direct reflection on the lack of competence on the part of the leadership in the UK.
Mrs May did let us down. Whatever happens, she's let us down, but she's got to go the course now because it's too late to muck about.
The problem is that the British politicians promised something to the people during the referendum that was never going to happen.
This is beyond just kind of, is Theresa May a good or bad person? This is about the proposition in front of us being...
So stay together, keep the country safe and united as well.
I won't vote again.
Well, those were some of the highlights there from our very first Your Call from here in Strasbourg. And we want to hear from you again tonight, and here's what we'll be talking about.
Order! Order!
British MPs have taken control of the Brexit timetable, and European leaders are reacting.
She must be totally devoid of the basic human skills that you need to be a political leader.
As the chaos continues in Westminster, the EU is still unclear on what Britain really wants. So, should the EU give up on the UK? Swinging to remain. In 2016, 52% of British voters were in favour of leaving the EU. Nearly 3 years on, have they had a change of heart? A new poll by What UK Thinks puts support for leaving at just 46% and remain at 54%. We want you to change your mind on Brexit. And for internet freedom. That's what critics call a controversial new copyright directive passed by MEPs today. It will bring sweeping reforms to how copyrighted content online is regulated. Proponents say it protects creators. Opponents say it will stifle creativity and freedom of expression. So what do you think? Is this the end of the internet as we know it? Let us know what you think. Should the EU give up on the UK? Have you changed your mind on Brexit? Is this the end of the internet as we know it?
So those were the questions. Now, all of the contact information is on your screen now. You can call us for free at 00800 333 7002 or send an email to rawpaul@euronews.com. And on social media, just use the hashtag #RawPolitics or also look for us on Skype. All right, joining me for this panel, we have our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, as well as Francis Zamet-Dimek. He is a Maltese MEP from the European People's Party. All right, Darren will be hosting your call tonight.
I will.
Francis is going to be there as well. Let's talk about the first question. Should the EU be giving up on the UK? I mean, this is something that we would love to ask MEPs. And
we want views of outside of Britain. Sure. What do you and the rest of Europe think about essentially walking away? Have you had enough? Are you fed up with Brexit? Certainly talking to a lot of people here, they are. And, you know, when I spoke to MEPs today, it is amazing, almost overwhelming, the view now that they simply do not want Britain to be taking part in these elections. They do not want this endless uncertainty of the Brexit process carrying on for the next 9 months, the next couple of years. They are just fed up to the back teeth of...
Are you fed up, Francis? Should you give up?
I come from a country which has always had and will always have the closest possible relations with the United Kingdom. So I can never adopt a stance of giving up. I like the European Union to always maintain best and closest possible ties with the United Kingdom. And if the United Kingdom would like to remain further in the European Union, as far as I am concerned, the United Kingdom is most welcome to do that.
But are you a little bit bored?
Well, I would certainly have preferred the situation to have been clarified by now.
I mean,
it keeps getting more complicated.
And what's interesting is this is a Maltese point of view. So you from who, because we'll get a lot of British callers, in fact. So all of you who are not from the UK, in fact, do call in because we do want to know what you're thinking. And of course, our British callers, we love hearing from you. You know, so this is the feed you were getting. You were talking to MEPs all day today.
Yeah, and they're just, you know, they just, what they don't want is this entire Brexit process consuming kind of the European narrative, taking up all the bandwidth of the European Union's institutions for years to come. In saying that, you know, there still is a hope, I think, amongst some MEPs, particularly those that have got an affinity to Britain,
also maybe,
that they would stay in.
Because the other question that we're asking our viewers is if they've changed their minds on Brexit, because that poll that we just saw, now it used to be 52% to leave and now 54% to remain. This is by what UK thinks. Does that give hope?
Well, it does give hope, and also I would like to look positively on the vote that has been taken yesterday, whereby the House of Commons is now stating we would like to set the parameters ourselves. Now, we still need to see how that will work out. I understand that a procedure motion would have been presented today, and by tomorrow we will know what the different options of the members of Parliament in the House of Commons are like. And hopefully they can come to some kind of indication by doing cross-party talks. So in a sense, it can be an opportunity.
And the interesting thing also is that talking about people changing their minds, an awful lot of Brexiteers today
you thought that
have
they wouldn't change their minds. All right, we would like to know if you had changed your minds. So do call in. Our number tonight is free. It's 00800 333 7002. That's the contact information. Send an email to rawpaul@euronews.com or look for us on social media, hashtag #RawPolitics. And before we go, we'll give you tonight's Raw Moment. It comes from right here in Strasbourg, where co-chair of the Greens, Philippe Lamberts, couldn't help but vent his frustration at what is going on over in London. Let's take a look.
Well, if there's one lesson that we have learned from Theresa May's attitude, is her inability to factor in what others think. When you listen to Xavier Bettel, Mr. Nice Guy definition, Xavier Bettel is someone who always tries to look, and I like the guy, to look at the good side of things. When you listen to Xavier Bettel, when he exited the council, you feel that if even Xavier Bettel is upset by Theresa May, she must be totally devoid of the basic human skills that you need to be a political leader. And that is scary.
Quick reaction to that, yeah.
No punches there.
Yeah.
No, I thought he was very clear, and that's also true.
You agree?
I think
Theresa
that there
May
is
has
scope for leadership, proper leadership. because the big frustration we have referred to earlier is nobody really knows what the United Kingdom would like to do. Now, as I said earlier, the House of Commons seems to have taken over control, but that has its own constitutional implications.
We will continue this conversation on your call, so do stay with us because we'd like to hear your views. Tell us what you're thinking. Do answer the questions that we posed on you, and thank you for joining us. Do stick around.